Hello everyone, this is Kindergarten Rocks channel here. Uh, Today we're going to read our last chapter of Number the Stars. And before we start reading, I just want to say that at the end of the book there's going to be an afterword, there will be an afterword, okay? Anyways, let's read our last chapter. Chapter 17. All this long time. The war would end. Uncle Ulrich had said that, and it was true. The war ended almost 2 long years later. Anne-Marie was 12. Church bells rang all over Copenhagen early that May evening. The Danish flag was raised everywhere. People stood in the streets and wept as they sang the national anthem of Denmark. Anne-Marie stood on the balcony of the apartments with her parents and sisters and watched up and down the street and across on the other side. She could see flags and banners in almost every window. She knew that many of those apartments were empty for nearly 2 years now. Neighbors have tinted the plants and dusted the furniture and polished the candlesticks for the Jews who had fled. Her mother had done so for the Rosens. It is what friends do, Mama had said. Now neighbors had entered each unoccupied waiting apartment, opened a window and hanged the symbol of freedom there. This evening Mrs. Johansson's face was wet with tears. Christy, waving a small flag, saying her blue eyes were bright. Even Christy was growing up no longer when she had lightened chatterbox of a child. Now she was taller, more serious, and very thin. She looked like the pictures of lice at 7. Lease at 7. An old album. Peter Nelson was dead. It was a painful fact to recall on this day when there was so much joy in Denmark. But Anne-Marie forced herself to think of her red-headed, almost brother and her devastating the day when they received the news that Peter had been captured and executed by the Germans in the public square of Ravingen. In Copenhagen, he had written a letter to them from prison the night before he was shot. It had said simply that he loved them, that he was not afraid, and that he was proud to have done what he could for his country and for the sake of all free people. He had asked in a letter to bury beside Lise, but even that was not to be for Peter. The Nazis refused to return the bodies of the young men they shot at Ravingen. They simply buried them there where they were killed and marked the graves only with numbers. Later, Marie had gone to the place with her parents. They had laid flowers there, and on the bleak numbered ground. That night, Anne-Marie's parents told her the truth about Lisa's death at the beginning of the war. She was part of the resistance too, Papa had explained. Part of the group that forgot for our country in whatever ways they could. We didn't know, Mama said. She didn't tell us. Peter told us after she died. Oh, Papa, Emery cried. Mama, they didn't shoot Lise, did they? The way they did, Peter in the public square with people watching, she wanted to know it all, but wasn't certain that she could bear the knowledge. But Papa shook his head. She was with Peter and others in the cellar where they held secret meetings to make plans. Somehow the Nazis found out, and they raided the place that evening. They all ran different ways trying to escape. Some of them were shot. Mama told sadly Peter was shot in the arm. Do you remember that Peter's arm was bandaged in a sling? At Lisa's funeral, he wore a coat over it so that no one would notice, and a hat to hide his red hair. The Nazis were looking for him. Anne-Marie didn't remember. She hadn't noticed the whole day had been a blur of grief. But what about Lise? She asked. If she wasn't shot, what happened? From the military car, they saw her running and simply ran her down. So it was true what you said, that she was hit by a car. It was true, Papa told her. They were all so young, Mama said, shaking her head. She blinked, closed her eyes for a moment, and took a long, deep breath. So very, very young, with so much hope. Now remembering Lise, Anne-Marie looked from the balcony down into the street. She saw that below aimed the music singing and the sound of the church bells. People were dancing. It was bright back another memory. The memory of Lise so long ago wearing the yellow dress dancing with Peter on a night they had announced their engagement. She turned and went to her bedroom, where the blue trunk still stood in the corner as it had all these years. Opening it, Anne-Marie saw the yellow dress had begun to fade. It was discolored at the edges, where it had lain so long in folds. Carefully she spread open the skirt of the dress and found a place where Ellen's neck lay hidden in the pocket. The little Star of David still gleamed gold. Papa, she said, returning to the balcony where her father was standing with the others watching the rejoicing crowd. She opened her hand and showed him the necklace. Can you fix this? I've kept it all this long time. It was Ellen's. Her father took it from her and examined the broken clasp. Yes, he said, I can fix it. When the Rosens come home, you can give it back to Ellen. Until then, Anne-Marie told her, I will wear it myself. So this concludes our book of Number the Stars, and at this time we are going to read our afterword. How much of Anne-Marie's story is true? I know it will be asked that. Let me try to tell you here. Where facts end and fictions begin, Anne-Marie Johansson is a child from my imagination through. She grew there from the stories told to me by my friend Ellie. Plant to warm. The book is dedicated to who was herself a child in Copenhagen during the long years of German occupation. I had always been fascinated and moved by Annie Lee's description, not only for the personal deprivation that her family and the neighbors suffered during those years and the sacrifices they made, but even more by the greater picture she drew for me of the courage and integrity of the Danish people under the leadership of the king that loved so much Christian eggs. So I created little Anne-Marie and her family set down in a Copenhagen apartment on a street where I walked myself and imagined their life there against the real events of 1943. Denmark surrendered to Germany in 1940. It is true, and it was true for the reason that Papa explained to Anne-Marie. The country was small and undefeated, with no army of any size. The people would have been destroyed had they tried to defend themselves against the huge German forces so surely with great scroll. King Christian surrounded, and overnight the soldiers moved in. From there on, for 5 years, they occupied the country, visible on almost every street corner, always aimed and shamed. They controlled the newspaper, the rail system, the government, schools and hospitals, and the day-to-day existence of the Danish people. But they never controlled King Christians. It is true. They had rolled along on his horse from the palace every morning, unguarded, and greeted his people. And though it seemed so charming as to be a flight of author's fancy, the story that Papa told Anne-Marie of the soldier who asked the Danish teenager, "Who is that man that story is recorded in one of the documents that still remains from that time. It is true, too, that in August 1943, the Danes sank their own entire navy in Copenhagen harbor as the Germans approached to take over the ships for their own use. My friend Annalise remembered it, and many who were children at the time would have been awakened, as little Christy was, by the explosions in the fiercely lighted sky at the ship's stern. On the New Year's of the Jewish holidays in 1943, those who gathered to worship at the synagogue in Copenhagen, as the fictional Rosens did, were warned by the rabbi that the Germans were to be taken and relocated by the Germans. The rabbi knew because of a high German official told the Danish government, who passed the information along the leaders of the Jewish community. The name of the German was G.F. Duckquist, and I hope that even today, so many years later, there are flowers on a grave, because he was a man of compassion and courage. And so the Jews, all but a few who didn't believe the warnings, fled the first raids. They flew into the arms of the Danes, who took them and fed them, clothed them, hid there, and helped them along to safety in Sweden. In the weeks following the Jewish New Year's, almost the entire Jewish population of Denmark, nearly 7,000 people, was smuggled across the sea to Sweden. The little hand-hammered line handkerchief that Anne-Marie carried to her uncle. Surely something made up by an author who wanted to create a heroine out of fictional little girl. No, the handkerchief, as well as a part of history. After the Nazis began to use police dogs to sniff out hidden passengers on the fishing boats, Swedish scientists worked swiftly to prevent such detection. They created a powerful powder composed of dried rabbit's blood and cocaine. The blood attached to dogs, and when they sniffed at it, the cocaine numbed their noses and destroyed temporarily their sense of smell. Almost every boat captain used such a permeated handkerchief, and many lives were saved by the device. The secret operations that saved the Jews were orchestrated by the Danish resistance, which, like all resistance movements, were composed many of the very young and very brave. Peter Nelson, through he is a fictional, represents that the courage and analysis young people, so many of whom died at the hands of the enemy. In reading of the resistance leaders in Denmark, I came across an account of a young man named Kim Malith Brun, who was eventually captured and executed by the Nazis. When I was only 21 years old, I read his story as I had read many others, turning the pages, skimming her here and there, the stabbage, the tactic, the capture, the escape. After a while, even courage becomes routine to the reader. The quite unprepared, I turned to the page and faced the photograph of Kim Melf Brun. He wrote a turtleneck sweater, and his thick light hair was wind-blown. His eyes looked out at me, unwavering on the page. Seeing him there, so terribly young, broke my heart, but seeing the quiet determination in his boyish eyes made me determined too to tell his story, and that of all the Danish people who stared his dreams. So I would like to end this with a paragraph written by the young man in a letter to his mother the night before he was put to death. And I want you all to remember that you must not dream yourselves back to the time before the war, but the dreams of you all, young and old, must be to create an ideal of human density, and not a narrow-minded and prejudged one. That is the great gift our country hungers for. Sometimes every little present boy can look forward to and with pleasure feel he is a part of something he can work and fight for. Surely the gift of the gift of the word of human density is one of is the one that all countries hunger for still. I hope this story of Denmark and its people will remind us that such a word is possible. 10-year-old Anne-Marie Johansson and her best friend Ellen Rosen often think about the life before the war, but it's now 1943 and the life in Copenhagen is filled with schools, food shortages, and the Nazi soldiers marching in their town. The Nazis won't stop. The Jews of Denmark are being relocated, so Ellen moves in with the Johanssons and pretends to be part of the family that Anne-Marie is asked to go on a dangerous mission. Somehow she must find the strength and courage to save her best friend's life. There's no turning back now. Woo! We are officially done with Number the Stars. We are going to start with our Dr. Seuss week. And after Dr. Seuss week, we will begin our book of Gina B. We will go back to our Gina B. Jones series for once. And then from there, so yeah, we are going to start with our Junie B. Jones series, but this time it's not going to be just Junie B. Jones. It's going to be Junie B. First Grader. So join us for that. Well, guys, it has been awesome to read Number the Stars with you. And I'd like to end this video with a special comment for you. So this was back in the 1940s. So this didn't happen in the 21st century. It happened in the 20th century. So it was all back in time. So this story is back in time. So and the Nazis they're the very bad people. So please do not think of doing that. Please don't. Okay? We do not want that. So just because I read a book does not mean you're going to act like them. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed our series of Number the Stars. Thank you for watching and have a good rest of your day.